about how much you're consuming on a screen or the sounds around you. All of that affects the work. And so I've started trying to tune into that a little bit and recognize what colors am I painting with when I have certain music playing, or how am I reacting when NPR is on. And lately, that's just a little stressful, quite frankly. So just figuring out at what point do I want to turn it off and when do I want to bring it back in my life and see how that affects the work.
That is so interesting. Good luck with everything. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start with, who are you?
I'm Rick Royale. We are at Royal Projects in downtown Los Angeles.
Would you say something about the current exhibition? How did it come about?
I wanted to do an exhibition bringing some new artists into the space. And there were a couple of artists that I thought would be interesting to show together. Instead of doing a typical kind of research the way we would have done it on other artists for this group show, what I thought would be interesting is to look at social media and see what we found visually out there, because obviously that is the way that a lot of people are looking at art now. So I put this challenge out to myself and my wife and to Nicolette, and we pulled together a group of artists that we just thought visually worked well together, that were interesting to us. And then we started looking into the artists, which is sort of often almost backwards the way that you would do it. You would know the artist first and then look at the work. One of the things that we found very curious was the commonalities between the artists that we were looking at. Many of them were women. Many of them had some sort of connection to California, whether that was they were living here, born here, had been on a residency here, etc. So that brought further questions to what this exhibition was going to be. And it really grew from there. And I think at the end, it ended up being interesting that we brought 6 different artists who really had no obvious connection to each other, but yet they had some sort of a cohesive kind of voice within their practices.
And also interesting that these artists did not know of each other beforehand.
True, exactly. After we selected a group of artists, we ended up obviously meeting them and sort of interviewing them, essentially, and visiting studios when possible. One of the things that came out in these sort of interviews was these connections that weren't obvious. Like we asked one artist, what are these sort of new artists that you're inspired by, and she had mentioned an artist's name that we ended up looking into, and it turns out that one of the artists of the show had done a 2-person show with that artist. So there's all these kind of cross connections that I think that became very interesting in the end.
And I think we need to say something about the title. What is the title of the exhibition?
Sure. If You Steal My Sunshine, California Abstraction Now. We have, historically, we often would title our group shows with songs just because it creates sort of a thematic approach. The songs would often, there'd be elements of the songs that we would be trying to capture within the exhibition. So this became a bit of a challenge because the exhibition created the theme. So we were just going to call it something else and not worry about the song. And then initially almost in joking, I suggested this particular song. So for those of you familiar with this song, it was a kind of one-hit wonder in the 90s. It became sort of a summer hit, right? Obviously, the sunshine was the point of reference because of California and the brightness of the exhibition. But as we thought more and looked more into the song, there's actually, it really, I feel, is a very, very interesting sort of thematic approach to it, because sort of the elements of the song itself were very diverse. It was sort of indie rock and sort of rap, hip-hop, I guess, disco, some electronic music, all just jammed into this song without any sort of care. It was also kind of structured after an 80s pop tune. It was a sister and brother duo, so 50% of the narrative is from a woman's perspective. And it ended up echoing sort of the unspoken ethic, in a way, of some of these artists' approach to their own practices, in the sense that they're bringing from other sources, but they're not necessarily being directly referential or even reverential of that work. It's really just, oh, here's a material, here's an aesthetic that I can use. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I think that the other interesting thing is that the song, though it's a really poppy and positive, fun song, there's a sort of a threat to it. It's like life, would be bad if you steal my sunshine, right? And if you really dig into some of it's kind of an abstract song. The narrative isn't overt, and people have read a lot into it over time, as people do, right? What is this, especially because it's a brother-sister talking, and whether that's intended. But the idea, this song itself, like I said, though there's a hugely positive feel to it, there is this looming threat. And I think that that's something that also I found interesting about these artists. The work feels very bright and very positive. And I mean, there's pink and glitter and neon colors. But we're also in a time that, and particularly for women, that it's a contentious moment. I think that's the right way of saying that. That also, I think, has a sort of a resonance to that song title, or that song.
So how has it been working in this way? Is it an approach that you would like to expand on? I mean, is it, because like you said, this is kind of backwards in a way, and ultimately you're using material that is out there. Someone put it out there on Instagram, and there's an algorithm somehow that has made this come about. Considering this is an art gallery, and we think about the art galleries working with a specific group of artists, and you have recurrent shows, this is something completely different.
Yeah. We do these exhibitions from time to time to kind of explore, right? We've done a number of group shows where we have explored sort of corners of aspects. We did a series a number of years back where we went into Los Angeles, did a ton of studio visits, sort of back to back, and put a couple of group shows together out of those visits. Some of those artists we've ended up representing from that time. So there is a sense where I think it's really important for us to continue to explore and not get too kind of set in our ways on things. So I think that is consistent to what we do. But the way we went about it, like I said before, it was like, oh, hear about the artists, go to the studios, then look at the work, right? It's sort of, this is look at the work, then go to the artist, and then, hopefully go to the studio, So it's kind of, it is backwards. Would we continue doing it? I don't know that we wouldn't continue doing it. I don't have immediate plans to go and do another exhibition on that, although I could change my mind tomorrow on that, because it's been really super to work with this group of artists. It's definitely brought, I joke sort of internally that there's been more questions asked as opposed to answered from this exhibition, so that means there's more to dig into. We looked essentially at painting, although that may be somewhat loosely defined. That's how we approached this, so we didn't even really approach sculpture or other media, quite intentionally. But so I think there is that. It could be explored. My relationship with social media is different. I'm not wildly active on it. It's something both in posting and in following. I'm not really. I use it. Obviously we all use it probably to a certain extent, but it's not something that's a super active part of my daily life. So to activate it as a tool has been interesting to me. To go and spend that time on primarily Instagram with that intention, I think was interesting. So that might be curious to kind of look more at that.
Is there anything we could say about the California abstraction now? Is there? Is that a bit too much to sort of describe what's happening in California, LA art at the moment? Maybe that's it's too much.
It's a very big statement. It's not really intended to say that this is all of what's happening in California now, which I think is one of the things about the song title with those. It does counterbalance a little bit. The title is the theme. The title of the song is the theme. And the California abstraction now explains why it's connected. I guess it's very difficult to do, and there are a number of curators particularly who try to do these big surveys of like what is happening in a city or in a state or in a whatever country in a moment, and inevitably it's an impossible dream probably, but I think it's a worthy pursuit.
Of course, and I think it's interesting that you try. I mean, at least you go out in the world and you have a look at many, many things, and then you try to draw some sort of conclusion.
Yeah.
It's very hard to say something about the now we're in.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Obviously, this exhibition is all women. It wasn't intended to be a women's show, and we didn't want to frame it that way. But there was no question through our research that was there was primarily. The source of the excitement we were viewing was being created by women. So that's saying there's something there. I don't think I could say, oh, this is California abstraction now. There's no male painters in California, right? So
that'd be wrong.
Yeah, so obviously that's a completely absurd statement. So that was never the intention. I think when we use a term like that, it really is like these people are in California making abstract work now.
And I say thank you very, very much for putting the show together.
Thank you for having us on your podcast.
Thank you so much.